Good evening. Welcome to ExPat InSights. I'm your host, Raju Manthian. Here at ExPat InSights, we take external views of internal successes by foreigners, expats, and immigrants who have made Philippines their home. Tonight is a special night. We have some guests here whose home is not the Philippines, but the USA, but they're here on a trip, on a visit, and they've conducted a workshop here on creativity and innovation. Thus, our topic tonight is creativity and innovation in companies and organizations. My guests from Palo Alto, California, and partners to Ancilla Consulting, Dr. Herman Gyr and Dr. Lisa Friedman of the Enterprise Development Group, California, authors of the book, The Dynamic Enterprise, which was published a few years ago. Welcome to ExPat InSights, Dr. Gyr and Dr. Friedman.
Wonderful to see you.
Well,
to be here.
Well, this is a show where we put out the good and we educate our audiences on things that are upcoming. So first tell us about how do you like being here in the Philippines?
It's been fantastic.
Okay.
So we did 2 different workshops that were here. So we did one with CEOs and one with managers and leaders in companies interested in innovation. And there was such energy, just so much creativity in the group. So much potential, so many opportunities. It was fun. It was wonderful to work with them.
Actually, the first time I was in the Philippines was 16 years ago, and it is amazing to see the energy that is now available in this country. It's quite a distinct change that I noticed.
That was 16 years ago that you were here.
16 years ago, yeah.
This is a question I need to ask you. It's because of the fact that we're promoting the Philippines. What is fun about being in the Philippines? What's that one fun thing you like in the last 1 week that you've been here?
Just the energy and how sweet the culture is. I mean, it seems like everyone is wonderful. It's warm, it's friendly. It's been a pleasure to be here. And then just the energy level. So I think that there's this sense of, particularly we were here around the business world, that things are moving very fast. One of the maps that we did in the group labeled, and it was fast forward. And I think you can really feel that energy that's here, so that was kind of exciting.
So the thing that I know in the country is fun for you.
Yeah.
For me, it's the level of curiosity.
Okay.
Everywhere I went, people asked questions. They were interested in knowing what is it that you're doing here, how do you feel about it, what do you think about the country. The kind of question you just raised, we get it all the time.
So
people really,
for learning.
It's tremendous hunger for learning.
More.
Yes.
That's fun.
And also then, in our work, so it starts with a hunger, and then when we began to do our work with the teams, it was incredible how quickly people used the tools and went to work and tried it out and talked to each other and worked it out together, and it was just remarkable.
I'll get more details on what you have achieved in the last 1 week in the field of innovation with the groups that you work. But before we go there, give us a little background about yourself. Profile yourself. What have you been doing together? I mean, not together for the world in the last 20, 30 years that you have been in this profession.
Well, so our company's Enterprise Development Group, and this is actually the 25th year anniversary of our company.
All right.
And what we do is, I think, 3 simple things. So we first help people look into the future to understand in their industry or their business, where's the world going, or where's the culture going, where are technology trends going. The idea is, from writing a book called Dynamic Enterprise, we're into things being dynamic, that they're on the move, that they're going somewhere. And really, whether you go there or not, the world's going somewhere.
Right,
so the first step is to try to understand where is the world going. And you can never really predict it, right? But by beginning to think about it, it gets you more ready for the change as things emerge. So to see where things are headed.
So let me rephrase that one more time. So you help companies and businesses to look forward, to think ahead. Not just think ahead, but look ahead of the curve first. Find out what may happen 5, 10, 15 years down the line in their industry and outside of the industry.
And that was important already 25 years ago when we began our work. But in the meantime, so much has happened, right? Think of the technological developments that have happened and how they, everything has speeded up. So it's even more important today than it was a few years ago that companies really spend time to understand what's going on, where things are heading, so that they can reposition themselves, they can refine themselves in a future where they can succeed again in completely different circumstances.
I know you and I talked about this just before the show, about
Right.
how the world has changed so much
Right.
in the last 20, 30 years. But for my audience, would you like to give us a picture of how things were way back in the 70s or 80s and how they are? Just so that they get on the same page as to what we are doing in terms of the statement that you made. That's one of the things that you do.
Yeah.
You do a few more things, right?
Yeah,
so
we do.
Doc, would you like to create that picture for us?
Well,
like how the world has
yeah,
changed?
absolutely. I mean, one thing that's really different in this time than ever in human history is that throughout human history, we've been inventive. I mean, that's what it's exciting to be human, because we're part of this continuing journey of discovery. And so we as humans invent things all the time, right? Somebody, Gutenberg, invents the printing press, and everything changes, right? Somebody invents the gasoline engine, the automotor, and everything changes. So every time there's that kind of invention, humanity takes a leap. What's different about this moment since the 70s is that we now have this thing called a microprocessor. Right?
The chip.
The chip.
Yeah.
And that chip, for the first time ever, evolves itself at an exponential rate. So every 18 months, that thing is twice as powerful. It costs half as much. It's half the size that it was 18 months earlier.
A chip that's in a cell phone, in a laptop, or in
all
a
kinds of
radio.
things now.
Yeah, you know, a chip that was in a rocket ship that, you know, back when was as big as this table.
Or a chip that's found on the beaches of California.
Yeah.
Silicon, right?
Silicon.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
And that continuing mutation of the engine of our, you know, of the technology is what drives this current moment very differently from anything we've seen before. So, you know, we get the iPhone, you know, 7 years ago. We get the iPad a few years, you know, 2 years ago.
There are some thought leaders, they call it moving from the agricultural age to the industrial age to the age of information. So what is this age? The age of technology, the age of idea,
Well,
the age
there
of
might be.
innovation?
Well, we think in terms of those big shift in eras, and we think of that shift in era when not just one business is changing, but really it affects every industry. So if you can look at those eras and think about when things moved from agriculture era to industrial era, every industry changed. So how you manufactured things, but also where people live. They moved from the farms into the cities, transportation, just almost food, everything you could name. Every industry was changed by industrialization. And it does feel like we're in that kind of shift again. But I can name at least two that are going on that are really big and important. So one is being into the digital era.
Right.
So I'm not sure it's just information, because it's communication, but it's everything, right, that merges together. So what the digital era does for us by being able to, it globalizes us. You know, we can work all around the world. We did a lot of the planning for this trip online. We did it so that we could communicate globally, and then we could actually be ready when we came here. So there is something about how digital technology is changing every industry. So we may work with groups that are saying, what's book of the future? That's different.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
What is the book of the
What
future?
is a book
What
of
is
the
a book
future?
as in?
So now we can have, this was a book that we wrote years ago, but now we can have a book that would be on an iPad, or it could have video in it, or movies. Or
in terms of the format of the book.
Exactly.
So what
in
would,
terms of the content
what
of the
will a
book.
book be? What will, what's newspaper of the future? What's healthcare of the future? What are transportation systems of the future? You know, how by having a digital world, how industry after industry after industry can begin to change.
Changing so rapidly.
Right.
So,
But I think-
So profoundly. I mean,
But I
it's
think
a
there's
complete
another
shift.
change too that we're seeing, and that is that because we've gotten ourselves into problems with the industrial era, with pollution and
Climate
depleting
change.
resources and climate change, that there is another huge shift, and that's moving into an era of sustainability. And people
Eco-consciousness.
have a whole, lots of different names for it.
Restoration, right.
You know, thinking of triple bottom line in business, or triple top line, the restorative era. So really thinking through how could we look around and redesign everything to be more sustainable. So, you know, anything from, I don't know, the clothes that I'm wearing, the kind of chair I'm sitting in, the energy that, you know, we use to light or
Houses,
broadcast.
lights,
How we got here. You know, really, if we think about it in an era of sustainability, we would probably look around and think almost everything could be redesigned to be
So
more
would that be the
sustainable.
second thing that your company does, Enterprise Development Group does, besides showing what the future may look like? What is the second or the third thing?
So the second thing is looking into that future and saying, who do we want to be in that future? Here we are.
As in terms of our spirit, or as in terms of our
positioning,
material
our place.
performances?
I think, probably both, I would say, but fundamentally you have to decide. I mean, one thing that is impacted by what we just talked about is that human beings who happen to be your customers also change in this process, right? So if the book changes,
they evolve.
Right. They have different expectations. If I'm going to read a book on my iPad, I'm going to expect that if I get to a certain point where I have an interest, I can search, I can browse, I can see a video, I can interact with a different
fun in the area of your choice.
Exactly, and so I become a different consumer. Right. A company needs to understand that change in my consumption habits, in the expectations that I have, to then rethink of itself about who do we want to be in that future. If the company doesn't adjust and says, well, we don't really care what happens to the consumer, within all that change, we'll just keep printing our stuff.
Right.
What happens to that company?
You keep on doing what you started off doing and not adapting to a changing
that
world.
Change, right.
Thus, when you adapt to a changing world, it's the person or an organization that you want to become.
Precisely.
So that's part two.
That's part two.
So part two might be, in that, if this is where the world's going, what might be our offering in that world? What products, what services? And then what Herman said, using the word positioning, is, I think that's important. If it's not just what will we offer, but you could say, who will we be? What do we stand for? What will we offer? What value do we offer to our customers or to society? So there is something that's just a touch extra about, in addition to what we will deliver in that future, it's kind of who we are, what we stand for, what we represent in that future. It's almost saying, here's this space, and we'd like to claim that space and say, there, that's us. And so it includes products and services and strategies and business plans and business models, but a bit extra about brand and identity and culture and values.
Can you cite an example of that? We may be able to concretize what you're saying in terms of somebody, some organization that might have changed and become.
Well, so for example, often the companies that work with us are being disrupted by the kind of developments we just talked about. And just to use a very non-technical example, one industry that we worked with that was very disruptive was the fishing industry a few years back.
In
Alaska.
In Alaska.
In Alaska.
Okay.
Right. And the challenge that they were facing was that the goods that they were putting on the market, fish, had dropped in price by 2/3. So it went from $2.40 to 80 cents.
Now, what was the reason for this drop?
Exactly. What was the reason for the drop?
We don't know that yet.
I understand. The reason for the drop was, of course, supply, as it usually is, right? Supply coming from fish farms in Chile.
Excessive supply.
Excessive supply and competitive supply, a supply that they had not ever had before, right? They were competing against other fisheries in the oceans.
Parallel supply.
Exactly. And what happened is that their positioning was, we have fish.
We have the fish. We are the fish kings of fish.
We're the fish kings of fish. And now we have another king.
Oh, there's another guy who wants to be king.
That's right. And it's starting to be really king because the consumers like that other fish because it's got a consistent quality, it's always fresh, it's never frozen, it has certain benefits.
Yeah.
And what was required for the Alaskan fisheries is to reposition themselves to say, but we're different. Initially, in the initial struggle, they were viewed as just fish.
Right.
But by seeing what was going on in the world around them and recognizing that they have to distinguish themselves, they could now reposition themselves as wild fish and add a premium to that, where the market said...
Why was it wild fish? Because
they were bringing...
Okay, they were not bred in a farm.
Exactly.
Yeah, they were fishing in the ocean.
And
those are the wild fish.
And that became a benefit to the market, that they could represent and could reposition something that they had lost the distinctivence, which then put them in the same bucket as the farm fish. Right? So that's kind of a non-technical example of what sometimes you can arrive at a very sort of simple repositioning, but that has profound effects. Right? Today, the market is very clear that there are two types of fish.
Was this a company that EDG, your company, helped, or
Right.
is something, a case that you're citing?
No, that's a
This
company.
is
No,
a few years ago?
Yes.
And actually, it was not just one company, but it was an association of fisheries.
Of all the fisheries.
Oh,
So
right.
it was
They
actually
were
the
in
whole
crisis.
association. So sometimes our clients are companies, sometimes they're associations around an industry, and then sometimes they're actually regions of a country. Or
So another industry, another example might be the telecom industry, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, sort of in the analog age, telecom was about giving people access to connection, right? So, telecoms put telephones in your home.
Yeah, the black dial-up phone.
Exactly, and they let you do that.
landlines,
Yeah.
What our clients realized through the work of looking where's the world moving is that that's just a given. You know, you have that connection. You don't have to worry about that anymore. Now, your business is about basically giving people mastery over their digital life. So that's a complete mind shift for a telecom.
Right. In the
to
last
go
20, 30 years. That's
to
amazing.
shift from, you know, where people just expect, give me the phone, to make this crazy life that continually evolves, that, you know, is changing all the time, useful to myself. You know, help me do
It's
that.
not just a product or a service, but it's actually saying what we will provide. What's the
It's an
real value that
experience.
will be there for the customers, that will be there as a guide, will be there as a companion for them, kind of as a coach. So that this is how, you know, this is how we can give you value and help you get comfortable with your digital life.
Let me take you to a little bit list-like discussion that I prepared now. And this is what you do. This is innovation. This is adapting to change and becoming the change itself in the future and positioning yourself. But there are so many schools of thought about this subject matter of creativity and innovation.
Yes.
How do you define it, Dr. Herman, Dr. Gyr? How do you go about defining creativity and innovation? Because it's such an abstract thing.
Right. I mean, I think for us, the issue is how can we, innovation is usually the request from our clients, right? It's not necessarily creativity. They are saying we need to innovate in order to succeed in the world that we just described.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so creativity is a necessary element of innovation, right? So innovation has to do with creating something that is new. So that's a creative
Tangible.
act. Tangible. That's a creative act.
Tangible or not really?
If you think
Should
that
be
it could be
necessary,
it could be an innovation of an experience,
Or
which
measurable at least. If not
right,
tangible,
it will be
yeah.
measurable. And the main quality of innovation is that it is something that has value in a market, right? If I invent something and nobody wants it, we don't call that innovation. We call that an invention.
Between an idea and
A
a value.
And a value
the
proposition.
Is that correct?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And when you make that distinction, innovation actually becomes a very straightforward activity, right? Because once you say innovation is about creating things, creating new things that are relevant to a customer, that a human being wants to buy, wants to have, wants to interact with, then it changes the way you will approach your thinking. Because instead of saying, I got an idea, right? Let me tell you about my idea.
We have ideas every time.
We have ideas every time. I have to discipline my thinking saying, and asking the question first, who is this idea for?
That's number
Is
one.
there a customer there? That's number one.
So the number one factor to measure the idea to be valuable?
To us, the number one factor of innovation is there a customer? Is there something that a customer says, I value around this new thing?
That's if I think of coming up with another TV show, and it's an idea.
Right.
But if I think of who that will be for, that would be my step number one.
Right.
Thinking of the end buyer or the customer or the consumer.
Exactly.
Would it provide value to the audience?
Exactly. Because otherwise you can't make a judgment of whether it's a valuable thing, right? If I just say, here's an idea, how do you make a judgment about whether it's any good? It might sound interesting to you, but if I can tell you, let me tell you, there are 50,000 people waiting out there for this particular thing, and they're willing to...
That's the number two thing. Or that's the still number one, customer.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Size of the customer.
Exactly.
the definition of a customer.
Exactly. Who is the
Define
customer
volume.
specifically? I want to know, if I want to be able to judge the benefit of your idea, I got to understand something about who you are creating.
That's how
that
big the
idea.
market is.
One
Exactly.
simple way that we said it too is that in terms of adding on to creativity as an ingredient into innovation, is that creativity is thinking something different, and then there's invention, which is making something different, and then there's innovation, which is making a difference.
Say that
So
one more time.
creativity is thinking something different.
All right, that's just in my mind. That's
Yeah,
in my
Exactly.
thinking it, we have great ideas,
Exactly.
lots of
That's
creative
creativity.
ideas,
Okay.
creative
And that's
thoughts,
wonderful,
we
right?
can be
Human beings are
creative.
creative. They love to think
art,
different.
Painting, color, yeah.
Absolutely.
Images, yeah.
Great.
And then once you actually invent it, and you could, or it could be, or creating, actually making a creation or an invention.
Physical creation, right.
Is then you're making something different.
Mm-hmm.
But what we like to add in terms of really providing something that's of value to a customer or a society is that then innovation is making a difference.
Is making a difference
in
to
people's
not just
lives.
making a difference.
Making a difference to
a person.
your
Value.
customer, or
Exactly.
your audience,
To
your
humanity,
society.
Right.
Yeah.
Or to a
That's
customer.
beautiful, actually.
Yeah.
That is a really beautiful description. Now, let me take you to some more details into this. No? Now, corporations across the world, you've helped several. Fishing is one industry. Are there any other industries that you have had a major effect on in the last 25 years that you've been active? What is your, if I was to say I want to recruit the services of Dr. Gyr and Dr. Friedman, who would I be? Would I be in the publishing industry? Would I be in the government or the non-government sector?
Hospitals, the oil and gas industry, the airline industry,
Lots
other
of
transportation
media.
industry, lots of media.
Here in Asia, in the
Nonprofits
Philippines,
as well.
You have been in the Philippines for the longest time. I mean, not physically present, but
With Ancilla,
spiritually and
yeah.
intellectually
Yeah.
present
Right.
here. So can you cite an example of your partnership, if you've done anything here in the Philippines or in Asia?
Well, we supported Ancilla, as they did their projects,
Yeah.
but we have not directly been involved. We did a project with J&J in Singapore,
Johnson &
Johnson. Yes.
And this was a product or process?
This was actually around a strategy. It was a strategy development process,
Okay.
so it was not directly linked to innovation.
Now, there are companies that don't see ahead of the curve, don't adapt to change, or don't become what the market demands them to be. What are the ingredients of a good business that drives them to be innovative?
Well, and that may get us back to what that third piece is when we
Okay.
said that we do three things.
Yeah?
Right? So
I thought the third one was positioning.
Nope.
That was
Nope.
number two.
It's actually number two.
All right.
The first one is still looking ahead, really understanding your market and your customers, and the
Yeah.
second one is thinking
Who-
about
who
who
are
you
you
want
gonna
to
be?
be.
Okay, that's
and then the third
positioning.
one, and the third one is thinking about here's my people, right? Here are all this 30 people, 3,000
That's your
people,
internal
30,000.
internal team, yeah.
Well, where are you today,
Your
right?
employees and maybe your partner or supplier network, and say, how do I have this group of people
Create
build
that
that future? So we see where the
Right,
world's going,
right.
where we want to go, and how do we help
What
this
are
group
the-
of people build that?
So that's the
So
third.
that's really
Well,
the
that
third.
is my question
So
then.
that's really
Exactly.
the most important piece, I think, of the work, but we do these first two. Sometimes
Yeah.
people start innovation and they actually don't start thinking about the customers or where the market's going, and they try to innovate something, but they might be then innovating something too small or that's going to be out of date quite
Yeah.
soon.
Or that's
Right.
kind of a fix of the current situation, where they have a huge opportunity in the that is right there in
Yeah,
front of them,
yeah,
but
yeah.
they've not done the thinking about,
Yeah.
what is it that we can
And I
actually
think,
play with
so
them
you
on.
asked us what about places that really weren't innovating or weren't looking ahead of the curve? Well, I think usually the people who call us, even if they haven't been doing it, they have some wish to want to do it or they wouldn't have called us. And it may be that some group, sometimes it doesn't always start at the top, sometimes it does, that the top leader sees something and
Yeah,
they have a
yeah.
vision and they want to move their organization forward.
Yeah.
But usually it's a mix. Usually
Yeah.
there's a mix of innovators and entrepreneurial thinkers and visionaries, and then other people who aren't quite sure and they're skeptical and they're worried about change. And so it may be that the innovators, somebody sees something, and that's when they call us in. And
So
then
it doesn't
we work
matter
with
from
them.
what end it starts from.
Yeah,
The
it
spark
doesn't.
of.
And
It
and
doesn't
there's
matter
always
from what
people
end it
who-
starts from, but it matters whether we get to the leadership relatively early in the game.
All right, let's take a pause.
Yeah.
And then I want to ask you more details about how companies can really activate themselves into doing what you recommend. No? But I want to close on this. So you're saying that you help people see the future, yeah, kind of map it, and then you find out how to get there and become who you want to be there, plus what effect it has on you as a team or an individual. Is that the conclusion of
And giving you the tools in order to get from here to there,
okay,
right?
Let's
As
take
part
a
of
break
the
and we'll come back. So stay with us. We are with Dr. Friedman and Dr. Gyr, and we are talking about creativity and innovation. I'm your host, Raju Mandhian. This is ExPat InSights. Stay with
You're back.
Welcome back to ExPat InSights. I'm your host, Raju Mandhian. We are talking about creativity and innovation, and we are with Dr. Gyr and Dr. Friedman from Palo Alto, California. They are the consulting partners of Ancilla Consulting from the Philippines. Doctor, we were talking about the three, what do you call them, factors, stages, parts, or three processes? Of
Well, they're really just the three parts of our work.
three things that you do. No?
Yeah, exactly.
And now, what kind of a company, what factors need to exist inside a corporation, inside an organization for them to be up to date, up to the mark in terms of innovating, as you said, not just changing but also adding value? So what is required inside a corporation? Does it have to be big, small? Does it have to be rich? What is required?
Well, I think in terms of what kind of company it is, it could be any kind. I mean, you can innovate anything, and you often have to. So it can be a company that's 3 people or 3,000 people or 30,000 people. It can be a region or an area that wants to bring innovation into its region and really create a innovative economy there, or an innovative ecosystem with companies and entrepreneurs or funders or universities.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
really
yesterday we had
anything.
dinner with a group of young entrepreneurs from around here, and they were eager to, figure out, is there something in this toolkit that we just talked about?
Maybe I need to rephrase the question. What should be the characteristics of a company that innovates well?
Right.
So one of the things that I think we bring in for them is that to have a shared, simple innovation system. So sometimes people don't innovate because they think it's complicated or it's scary or it's a little too wild and woolly, and that creativity might be scary for them.
So here's a quote that comes to mind from Gary.
Quote.
From Gary Hamel, and he said, every CEO in today's rapidly changing world will say, we need to innovate. We need to be more innovative as a company.
Yeah, people say that.
Exactly. But when you ask them, what's your system? What's your innovation system?
Yeah.
How are you going about it?
Yeah.
You get blank looks. They have none. And so that's what Lisa's talking about, is that fundamentally what we're finding is a lot of companies just don't have a systematic way to innovate. It's very haphazard. Or if they have something, it's sometimes more like an idea box, where loads of ideas get placed into some kind of system that then overload the system. People have high expectations that, okay, now I'm innovating, I'm being invited in to be innovative in my company. But because there's all this energy, the system gets overloaded. There's not enough infrastructure in place to actually sift through all those.
So there's fluff coming in. But nothing concrete going out.
Exactly.
Nothing concrete.
Or it can get overwhelming to just sift through
have all
so
that
many
fluff
ideas.
coming in. Yeah.
Exactly.
All that cotton candy coming in.
Exactly. And so the task that we find, and that what we see in companies that do it well, is that they generate the ideas but not fluff. How do they do that? They basically guide their people to have a clear framework that allows people to formulate their ideas in a way where it's no longer fluff, where a person who comes up with an idea has to have a discipline about creating enough clarity about their idea, like who is our customer?
That was the first thing that Dr. Friedman mentioned, no?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So back to what we talked about earlier is, are they connected to this customer?
Right.
Do they understand what the market opportunity really is? Do they understand what it's going to take in terms of resources to develop their idea? Do they know what the alternatives are, that there's competition? How are they better than the competition? What is their advantage? What is the secret sauce that they have in place that's going to make this a special thing? And also then, of course, what is it that the financial benefits are to the company, et cetera. So,
and that system, just to add on to that, is that system actually has a name. And so it's one of the parts of our work that people tend to like best. Because we bring in simple tools. So we bring in here different pieces of an innovation system from beginning to end.
So
and they all
that
fit
would be
together.
the first block, knowing the customer, defining the customer.
Absolutely.
What would be block 2? to...
So one of the tools, and it kind of builds it in there, is that that one of the tools is called CoStar. And it's a way for turning...
Right.
Well, actually, it's not from that one. It's a book we're working on. So we actually are in the midst of writing a book that's called CoStar.
Yeah.
And it's CoStar is a way, it's a tool for creating value propositions. And what we find is that if people have shared language and shared concepts about how you innovate and shared tools, it makes it easier for people to turn their ideas into value propositions and help each other and improve the ideas and collaborate and get the expertise that they need from anywhere in the system. So that's one of the things we bring in, is an integrated package of innovation tools. And so, but one of the favorite tools is always CoStar.
This is an internal language. That's an internal, open state of communication within an organization for them to be able to talk in the same lingo.
It does.
So
and CoStar sums up what Herman was just talking about.
Yeah.
So CoStar is a tool that you could say, well, I have an idea. You know, I have an idea.
CoStar isn't like in the movies, like, you know.
Well, it could be. You could end up being
and
a CoStar.
Charlie Sheen.
Yeah, you could end up being a co-star if your innovation is successful. Yeah. So co-star is that you start with really understanding your customer. So, so if you don't just say, here's my idea.
Yeah.
You say, here's the customer, and here's what this customer's needs are, here's what's urgent, here's what the customer would value. And then the O is, here's the opportunity. And there's actually a hyphen in co-star, so the C and the O are, you describe the need and the urgency before you just start to describe your innovation. The O is, what's the really big opportunity here? The customer might need things that you could meet in any number of ways, but where's the place? And it might be usually that you also pull in things and say, well, in this world, looking at where things are going or the digital era.
That opportunity is seen or captured by knowing what's happening in the market.
In that outer world.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's one of the first things.
And if you put those together, you could say, here are new ways to meet the customer needs. And here's a really big, significant, important opportunity.
A new technology.
A way to provide value to this customer.
So the opening of the China market, or the interest in green
technology.
technology.
A certain awareness, a certain high awareness, and recognizing that here's a gap.
Right.
And because I know my customer, because I have a little openness inside my system, I can fill in that gap because I know it.
So and when human beings in the workplace are asked to start to think in those ways, the fluff goes away, right? They start to be much more thoughtful, much more disciplined.
More zeroed in on what
exactly.
And that's inventive, not innovative yet, but inventive.
Yeah. Right. So the CO is, here's the opportunity we want to capture, we want to fulfill or contribute to, and the star is what we're going to do. Right? So star is your solution, S for solution, T for your team, who all it would take, A for
what are the capabilities, the strengths, the skills you need in order to fulfill your solution.
A is the advantage over competitors or advantage over alternatives, where an alternative could be that we don't even do anything, but all the alternatives. What's our advantage? What's our secret sauce for this? And the R is, what's the result? If we deliver this, what results would we get? And that's where it becomes tangible. But results are also the reward to the customer. Nice that it starts with an R.
Money.
And the return.
Line,
and then, but it could be reward and also other kinds of value. And then it also could be what's the return to the company or to the maybe the whole alliance of company and suppliers and all the different partners that are part of delivering that solution. So what's our ROI? What's our return on investment? So that's CoStar, customer, opportunity, solution, team, advantage, and results.
Now, you spoke about triple bottom lines, that's people, planet, and profits, no? But planet and people is kind of dicey to measure, yeah? So is it fine to measure just the profits? Is it okay? I mean, not given the fact that...
Absolutely. In this, remember, the goal of bringing a discipline like CoStar into an organization is that it gets rid of the fluff.
Yeah.
Right? Because people are starting to think about these fundamental elements that ensure that their idea has any value, that it has any kind of possibility to ever really be an innovation. Right? Again, remember, if it doesn't produce value for a customer, it's not an innovation. So
Okay.
these 6 questions assure that people are starting to think in ways that
In
make
terms
sure
of
that they themselves can make a judgment of whether or not, in the end, what I'm working on, what I'm excited about, is actually delivering value.
In terms of your ideas becoming inventive or inventable,
Right.
and innovative in terms of where the value was put in. So
Exactly.
ideas into inventions, into innovations, as long as they keep
Exactly.
measuring
Exactly.
one of the 6 blocks of CoStar.
Exactly,
Fantastic.
and that is an automatic, it's like a forcing, we call that a forcing function. It forces your mind into a set of fundamental questions that ensure that at the end you come up with something valuable.
Yeah.
And through that process, you can continuously make up your own mind, is this idea good enough? So you don't have to bother anybody out there initially with something that in the end is not very valuable because you've done a lot of work. And that's just to finish that triple line thing.
Yeah.
If all you do is show me that it has really a lot of good results at the financial level, and that's what you want to show me in terms of the value of your idea, I'll take it.
When you
Well, there's one part
Yeah.
though that adds into that, but I think it helps to have that awareness of triple bottom line. Or we actually like
Right,
to flip
it's
it
an
and say
awareness.
triple top line. Are you adding value? Not just that you're not doing harm, but that you could add financial value and add social value and add ecological or environmental value. And I think the one way it just helps to always have those a bit as a framework. It may not be the focus of what the CoStar is. For many people it is, and for many more and more businesses today, they actually want it to
something you
fulfill
wanna
all
think
3.
about.
But there are different levels of CoStar. So you can have a fresh CoStar, you're just really thinking it through, brainstorming with friends, getting the first idea.
Yeah.
You
So-
add in
so-
the feedback and you
Yeah.
go next. But at some point you have to do the detailed, almost business plan level of CoStar. And for that you need to make sure your solution doesn't do any harm in those other 2. Because if you have
to people and planet.
to people and planet. Because if you have something that would make you a lot of money, but it would harm people,
It'll
or it would
still-
harm the
you'll
planet,
still fall back.
at some point, somebody now in a digital world,
Yeah.
you don't get to define your brand anymore.
Yeah.
The world defines your brand. The world comments on your
That's
product.
thinking congruence.
So if you're doing something that's harmful on those other 2, at some point it will affect your results.
Let me,
So-
on that note, that's really a good point. That's another good point, Dr. Friedman. No?
Yeah.
But in terms of real applications, when you partner with a company and they recruit you and you go in and say, we're going to help you change, we're going to help you put you into the future, no? How long does your partnership last, and what is the kind of arrangement that you have with corporations?
Well, one thing that is absolutely the case is that in the world that we described earlier,
Yeah.
companies want to see results quickly.
Right. So speed is important.
Speed is absolutely important.
What's an average alliance?
So what
average
we look
period?
to is we look to showing results within the first 3 to 6 months.
That's it. 3 to 6
That's
months.
how quickly we're generally today able to bring in first innovations.
In less than
Often
Yes.
what we call a beacon project, like something that really is like the beacon, the lighthouse, or the thing
Right.
that you look
Right.
toward that's the guiding light that shows it's possible, shows it can be done, gets people excited about it. So actually to start working on and have one visible project.
Thus,
So then-
there may be many interventions, innovative interventions going on. So what you do is you start with one.
One very visible.
Is there
So-
anything
so-
that you're doing currently across the world that you can cite an example without giving away much data? That you,
So I give you a quick example of a very large broadcaster, known to your audience undoubtedly, where the Beacon Project became one of the radio stations.
yeah.
The radio
Which one is this? Okay, no names, fine. GNN. All right, yeah.
And so that became fundamental, right? Because that radio station went from basically having a significant problem with listener statistics to being able to quickly show growth in their listening numbers by making a shift to it's a much more customer-focused orientation, innovation around that kind of thing. And within 6 months, actually won a very critical award that was, where the rest of the organization was able to point at it as if it were a beacon and say, look, if we do this.
We made one change. It's
Yeah.
like Apple coming up with one product.
Right.
Yeah.
And they say, okay, we were extremely successful
Right.
with one of our innovative interventions.
Exactly.
Now we can do several more. Like
Yeah,
Apple
exactly.
disrupted several industries when Steve Jobs was still alive.
And yesterday they just announced that they're going to disrupt education in a really big way now. So there you go.
How is that?
Next big
You want to share that story? What is that happening?
Well, it was in the papers yesterday that they are moving now very radically into the education market on the iPad.
Apple is doing
Apple
that?
into what's still called a textbook, So they're kind
not
of
Kindle, not yeah.
right.
And so I wanted to clarify something too about how long we work with groups. Because sometimes it's 3 to 6 months, but sometimes it's actually, we may just come in and do workshops. So sometimes we're just coming in, we're doing trainings, we're doing leadership summits, and we're kicking off something, and we may work with a team, and it might be even much more short term. Or it might be a training, similar to a CEO summit that we did here.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's very short. Other times it's that we really do go in and work with the company, and then that may be something that we work with them over, a couple of months, up to 6 months. But sometimes we actually then, if it's a group that's very large or wants to include their partners and suppliers, it may actually go even longer. It's because they may say, now that we have this group, we have our beacon projects, we want to spread it. If it's a global company, they may say, well, these other groups need to know, or these other departments, or our partners need to know, and then it actually spreads. It depends really on the size and scope of
Here
the
in
project.
Asia, in the Philippines, now that you have had some contact with several companies here in the Philippines, what are your suggestions to companies here? How do they stay on the edge and keep moving ahead faster than the rest of the pack? What are your top 3 suggestions?
Yeah. I think it's a really significant opportunity from what I'm sensing.
In Asia or
in
in
Asia
Asia,
today. Obviously, I mean, you can feel it, right?
Yeah.
And the interest is there, the curiosity is there. And I think the opportunity is to move away from an attitude, and maybe you want to talk about that a little bit as well, that says we're the low-cost creator of things that have been invented elsewhere. And
so duplicating stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Forget that.
We were
There's
asked that for an interview
now.
before.
Yeah.
They said, well, should we just, why not
Should
just
we
copy?
even innovate?
Why not just be fast copiers? Do we even need to innovate?
Well, is that a good thing, to be a fast copier?
And
Early
Well,
adapter?
we believe that might have been a good thing, but I think there's a real opportunity to do something much more valuable, because being a fast duplicator basically, forces you into a situation of being the low-cost creator. So it keeps your incomes low. It keeps it creates a situation where you maintain something that you're quite capable of today.
Right.
But we believe that there's significant opportunities to actually move into areas.
Brand.
Into innovation.
why not create what's the best, and then you can charge what you want for it, because actually it's
so
where you get it
lift,
first, or where you get it.
You lift everyone. You don't keep buying into the notion that Asia is cheap labor. Like that.
And we saw the potential for that, just even in the works, in the teams that were working together, and that we saw the creativity, incredibly creative groups, and fast, very fast-paced, very energetic. So the potential is right there. So if I think about what are our recommendations to companies, I think it really would be to find maybe that core of where the innovation champions are. Where's the entrepreneurial spirit? Where are the innovators?
Within themselves.
Where are the champions? Where are the champions? And let that group really think through, how would we bring innovation into the company? Or is it urgent? What's the urgency?
And then
how do you nurture them? How do you reward them?
Exactly.
What are the best ways to do it?
I think that's the next step. Is think of what Deming did to Japan, right? And the opportunity to create a way of thinking inside Japanese companies back in the 50s, and this is a new opportunity now. What we can bring to this market is the capacity to quickly install systems that guide people to innovate effectively, the way Deming did for quality.
Years ago.
Years ago, right? And it revolutionized Asia. It revolutionized the quality of Asian product. I think now we have the opportunity to revolutionize Asia again in terms of the real innovation. And again, just like Deming did back then, there's a systematic, simple, straightforward way to do that. There are tools that can be installed quickly into these organizations. Some, web-based kind of infrastructures that allow people to learn the tools, to use them with each other, and to develop innovations very quickly.
So how people can develop in person with each other, but how that's also mirrored online, how you can innovate with each other online as well.
Doc, we've got like a couple of minutes before we wrap up this show. And what I'd like to do is probably give you a moment to talk about your partnership with Ancilla here in the Philippines, the history of your partnership, and where you're going together in the next few minutes. So a minute each on Ancilla, if you don't mind.
Well,
what are you doing with Ancilla? How good are they?
So this is what what I just talked about.
Wonderful.
I think what I just talked about is very much what we're aiming for to do with Ancilla. That is, we believe there's a tremendous opening
Yeah.
with a simple set of tools, with a fundamental discipline that we
Yeah.
have just described,
Yeah.
with tools like CoStar, a number of these other kind of capabilities,
Yeah.
to give people the frameworks that allow them to innovate effectively,
Right.
to not deliver fluff, and to do it very quickly. And Ancilla is our partner in establishing
Value and
programs
money.
that will be
And
able to
what's
do that.
wonderful about Ancilla is we've been connected with them for years, right?
Right.
And talking back and forth and developing our ideas. They're wonderful. They're a respected organization. They've now working with CEOs and then also working throughout really all the levels of the organization where they have excellence in training programs,
Yep.
but then also being able to go in and facilitate and help make things happen. So I think that we're beginning to work together to see how these innovation tools fit and can work here in the Philippines and throughout Asia. Because what we came away with from the events we just did with Ancilla was, as people were mapping the future and talking about the future, that this is an amazing moment here.
This
is a moment. They labeled one of the maps fast forward because it felt like
I wish you'd brought that here.
there is so much opportunity that's happening, but it's very fast-paced. Customers are very demanding. They want everything customized. They said they want everything the latest, the newest. So it's not an easy moment, but it is an amazing moment. So it felt like there's a real opening and there's an opportunity to be seized. And so, we're not here all the time. We collaborate with Ancilla, but then they are here and they can help carry out and do the implementation.
Any chances of you folks coming back in the near future? And
I'd love to.
Yeah, we would love to
I mean,
come back.
we love this place.
well, I'd like to thank you for being on this show,
Fantastic.
ExPat InSights, and thank you for those wonderful insights,
Good.
Dr. Friedman.
Sure.
If there's anything you want to say to your friends that you met in the last few weeks, this is your moment, and that's your camera over there.
Oh, that's great.
You can say bye. Thank you for having us in the Philippines.
Thank you very much. It was a remarkable experience, and we're going home with fire in our hearts.
5 days in the
Yeah.
Philippines, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
right. And I think we met amazing innovators, and we also heard about incredible needs and opportunities in just a range of different industries. So I'd just like to say to those innovators, stay on track, keep that energy high, because really the things you're working on are desperately needed. So.
Gracias, salamat, and mabuhay for being in the Philippines. Thank you
Yeah,
very much.
thank you.
That was Dr. Friedman and Dr. Gyr from Ancilla Consulting. I'm your host, Raju Mandian. Thank you for watching ExPat InSights, and we'll see you next Sunday, same time, 9 p.m. Good night and mabuhay.